Welcome to Art House Legends Podcast, where high art and geek culture collide. I'm the MovieDude Eric, your host that may or may not be feeding the seabird at this very moment.
I'm Chris Tondevold.
And I'm Jonolobster, and just like Willem Defoe, I can fart on command. You're fond of me, lobster, ain't ye?
In this episode, we're discussing The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson, Willem Defoe, and directed by Robert Eggers. Gentlemen, I gotta say, I have been thinking way too much about this movie since I saw it last October. I gotta ask, what have you heard about this movie before? Have you seen it before watching it for this episode? And let's start off with Jonolobster, since you're the returning guest.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on to talk about this film. And the answer is yes. I have been obsessed with The Lighthouse since it was announced, and certainly since the first batshit trailer came out, which you will see is pretty much the movie, just cut down. And then I became also obsessed with the SpongeBob cut of said trailer. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Yes. I'm not a huge SpongeBob SquarePants fan. Personally, I was a little old for it when it came out, but through, I guess, memes, I've become more familiar with it than actually watching the show. But the SpongeBob cut of the trailer, and now they've cut an episode of SpongeBob in the style of The Lighthouse, so there's another one out there. But I have this weird affinity for odd movies, I guess concept movies, if you want to put it that way. And this feels like a concept movie. This was like, we're not just going to do a movie about Willem Defoe and Robert Pattinson on, as two wikis on an old lighthouse. We're going to shoot it in black and white. We're going to do a weird aspect ratio. And just the way the film is constructed, I love. And it's movies like this that stand out from the rest of the pack. Now, I will say that in sort of getting amped up for this movie, I did see, which I had not seen previously, Robert Eggers' first film, or I guess first feature film, The Witch, or as we know, as stylized in the poster, The Vivitch. And that, again, it's a period piece. It hews very close to, I think, what this film is trying to do, which is to do a character study and sort of this morality play. But at the same time, it's in color, it's in traditional aspect ratio, although there are some interesting staging choices, I'll say, with that film. It is more of a traditional movie. This is completely different, and I was way more excited for this, even though horror is not my thing, so I kind of had not checked out The Vivitch before, but this I kind of classify as something other than a straight horror film. And I might argue a little bit about what the genre is. But no, I was super excited for this film. This is a movie I've been dying to talk about on a podcast. So again, I'm grateful for you for inviting me on to chat about it.
What about you, Chris?
I was told to watch it, and I never did. And then I watched it for this, and I am very disappointed that I didn't see it in the theater. Mostly because of the aspect ratio and the sounds in there.
Yeah.
I have a decent, little sound setup at the house, but it's not the same as a theater for sure. And being that gripped, I guess would be a good way to say, because I'm from the get-go, you're basically bought in because of the aspect ratio.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that you've never seen before. So you're going in already with that, and then the fact that it's black and white, and then the fact that you have all these other things that are happening, and it's almost symmetrical, like right out of the gate, which really draws you in to the center line for this movie, so that it's aiming right there, and that's how I felt. I liked The Witch, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree.
It was fine. Like, the language was okay. I didn't care about that. To Eric's recommendation, I watched this with subtitles. As far as the Lighthouse goes.
Oh, interesting.
Because there was some stuff that I knew that I was going to miss for sure, because I started without subtitles, and I was like, what are you saying?
So you mean the accents threw you?
Yeah. Okay. Defoe's specifically. Pattinson's was fine. I'll go into a different tangent about his accent in this later. But with The Witch, I thought it was really well done. I like the cinematography, which carries through with this movie. It's gorgeous. I really like all the color. The colors in The Witch were done right as far as the daytime and making everything kind of stark. And then when you go into the nighttime and making it a lot more sinister, it felt really nice to me. The way that they use shadow in the lighthouse and with the huge light inside the lighthouse itself as the beacon for everything, absolutely loved. So I'm excited to talk about it. I don't know how I feel about it, which is the same thing with The Witch. With The Witch, it was the ending that really like threw me off, and I don't know why. I thought like everything was kind of dumb at the end, but that's just me.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get to that probably next year for Art House of Horror.
Yeah, I have to stump. So I'm a host on a podcast called Legends Podcast, just Legends, not Art House Legends. But we did the Vivitch last October as part of our Halloween month, and watching the movie again. I guess watching it for the first time and then talking about it. I didn't really know what to make of it. So I have more concrete opinions about this film. And I think that's kind of the way you're meant to feel. I think Robert Eggers made The Witch as more of a mainstream film because he had to. As a first-time director, he kind of needed to prove that he could make a standard movie before a studio... Which, I mean, all props to A24 because they have been knocking it out of the park the last couple... With what they have been making and what they have on deck. But I really have to give them credit for saying, okay, yes, you made a weird horror movie. It was a period piece. People liked it. Like, it was really well received. And he's like, but I really want to make this movie. And they're like, okay. I mean, one of my favorite movies from 2018 was Mandy, which is another A24 release. But I mean, I just love that movies like this are getting made.
A24 had 4 great movies last year. And of those, 2 of them made my top 20 list. The Lighthouse made my top 20, and Waves, which if you have not seen Waves, see it, but don't let anyone ruin it. Don't find out anything about it. Go in completely blind, because there is a twist in that movie that is so amazing that to spoil it would be to ruin the movie. But it's amazing. And Sterling K. Brown, this is a movie that will make you change how you think about Sterling K. Brown as an actor.
Gotcha.
They also had Uncut Gems, which came out.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say. And that'll be on Netflix later this month, which I'm excited about.
Yes, I've actually already seen it. It's good. And again, thinking about Adam Sandler doing something amazing, it makes you really pissed off that he doesn't do this more often.
Right.
But then again, whenever he does these kinds of more art house movies, they tank at the box office, and that only encourages him to go back and do fart jokes again. So we have ourselves
plenty of fart jokes in this movie. Don't knock it.
Okay, well, you know what I mean. We had another Happy Madison movie come out on Netflix this week, and trust me, it's not worth it. All right. Anyway, but back to The Lighthouse. So I'll be honest. When I saw this movie in theaters, I had 2 thoughts come into my mind as I was leaving the theater. Number 1 was, what the fuck did I just watch? And I don't say that very often. Normally I have a pretty good idea of what I've seen, or I can kind of make out what the movie's going for. This one, I kept thinking about this movie for weeks after I saw it. Like, even parts of it, I was like, I wasn't even sure if I saw it right. Like, maybe I was dreaming some of this. It was that kind of lucidity.
Were you your own unreliable narrator?
I think
as
so.
The characters are in this movie, that you're not sure if you've been there for 2 years, 3 days, whatever you just saw.
Rewatching it, there were things I was like, okay, that didn't really happen, right? And
Yeah.
then, it did happen, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay. But the thing is that I had a hard time really kind of, really peddling this down. Even now, even as we talk about this movie today, I'm not exactly sure if I know what is going on.
Is that like, and just kind of like opening up how we maybe approach this film, is that because, as Chris was saying, it looks so different, it feels so different, it's not presented to you as true life? I know one of our first movies that we did on Art House Legend was a Dogma 95 film, The Celebration.
Yes.
And one of the things that you have to kind of get over as you're watching a movie that is not presented in the typical studio style is everything just feels off, right? And so maybe you have trouble suspending your disbelief, as you kind of have to do with most films.
Oh, a part of that, I think, but another thing, and I'm almost certain that and I'm pretty sure that Robert Eggers has even said this in an interview. I feel like he came to this movie with the concept of two men in a lighthouse at a specific time, and then basically just didn't even really write a script in the sense of what we consider a script. Like, there's no real structure in kind of progression of a story, so to say. It's more motif and more kind of a vibe and a feeling that you're getting from these characters, and the progression of the characters more than a progression of and especially considering where this movie goes. It definitely left me with these kinds of thoughts, and so as I was trying to recontextualize the movie, I found myself thinking about, okay, what are the themes here? What is this movie trying to talk about? And then
you said you had two thoughts when you left the cinema. What was the other one?
The second thought was, I wonder what Jonolobster thought about this movie.
Yeah.
That was the
It kind of has my name written all over it, doesn't it? Like,
yes.
if you think back to the movies that I liked when I was on Art House Legends.
Yes. So
I'll
be honest.
Fair point.
When I decided that yes, I have to do The Lighthouse because I have to watch this again. I have to figure this movie out. That I basically called an audible. I was like, okay, we're putting down everything. We're doing The Lighthouse,
right? And
I'm getting Jonolobster for this because.
Yeah, you didn't have to twist my arm very hard, I think, to get me to sign up.
I offered something I don't offer with any guest.
Yeah.
People will find out about that later in the year. But anyway, let's go ahead. Let's talk about this movie because there is a lot to unpack here. And I think we should start off by discussing the two main leads here.
Yeah.
Because Willem Defoe and Robert Pattinson. Well,
them. I mean, it's them through the whole movie. I know the mermaid is credited as having a role. The other male character whose face you see I don't believe he is credited, but I don't want to talk about him yet.
Yeah.
But it is Pattinson and Defoe is the film.
Yes. This is entirely these two guys. And especially considering where these two men are in their careers right now, because these are guys that are pretty big actors, even A-list in a way. But the thing is that both these guys are hardcore indie actors.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to promise people that we're not going to be making a whole lot of Twilight jokes.
Well, I actually want to mention that because I think, so obviously Robert Pattinson became a household name as Cedric Diggory from Harry Potter. No, I mean he did, but he became a household name because of Twilight. But he's worked almost exclusively within the past decade to do roles that run counter to that, with the exception of Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which is going to come out hopefully in July, maybe later. We'll find out. And as Bruce Wayne in Matt Reeves' The Batman.
What, no love for Water for Elephants?
But I feel like he's an actor who established his name as a leading man, but I think in his core, he doesn't see himself as a leading man. I'm going to make an argument here, which is I think Pattinson sees Pattinson as Willem Dafoe is based off of his career. Willem Dafoe's career has been playing a character actor who is a consummate sort of presence. Yeah, in everything that he does, whether it's the Green Goblin, whether it's a Wes Anderson movie, whether he's in drag in The Boondock Saints. I mean, all the way through his career, right? Yes. He's one of those actors who is instantly recognizable. And yet a lot of people don't even really know his name. You just kind of know it's that guy. And I want to say that Pattinson sees himself more as Defoe and less as the kind of leading man that has kind of befallen him. And I think that's why he spent so much time trying to distance himself from that sort of leading man status. It'll be interesting to see where he goes with how he approaches the Batman, and how he does in Tenet, which I keep forgetting that he's in, but he's not the lead. It's
no, John David Washington.
Correct. Yeah, is the lead in that. But
I like that comparison though, him and Defoe. And then seeing, if you just look at their careers, they are fairly similar outside of the fact that Pattinson has Twilight and has Harry Potter. If he just had Harry Potter, it would be very similar, because you're looking at, the Spider-Man movies for Willem Dafoe and all the things that people want Dafoe to play in as far as any kind of superhero movies. That I think that's actually a really good comparison, and the acting chops for both of them are on full display in here.
Right. Yeah. And I don't mean to be don't Willem Dafoe, if you listen to this, don't take this as a diss, right?
Yeah. Won't.
If you know what I mean. But I want to say it's Pattinson's looks that have just, you know what I mean? And that's not his fault. Do you know what I mean? It's just like Willem Dafoe, who has a very distinctive look, that's not his fault. That's just the way the dude looks. Yeah. But I think if Pattinson wasn't as handsome as he was, he may have had the career that he envisioned for himself, right? This is a weird just theory that I have. But I think if you look at this film in particular, in which his looks are called out quite often by Defoe's character, that kind of fits with that.
No, you're right, and we really need to talk about this movie because we're about half an hour into this.
Yeah,
and I have a feeling we're gonna be using up all.
There's a
of
lot.
This time.
There's a lot you can say here.
All right, so I want to really first I'll talk about this opening shot. How about the opening
sound? How about the foghorn being the first impression you have of this film? And it's faint at first, and then it grows and grows and grows to the point that, at certain points during the film, it's deafening.
Yeah.
And, I want to say that this film, for a film that is dark, it's in black and white, it's a narrow aspect ratio, this film plays on all of your senses. It plays on smell. There is a monologue by Robert Pattinson that describes how Willem Dafoe's character smells. I will not I will not say all of it, except he says jism, which anytime that word comes up in a movie, I'm thrilled. Taste is a big part of the film. The way certain things taste, you can imagine turpentine mixed with honey,
Oh God, I almost threw up. Thinking about that.
But light, as Chris said, and sound is so key in this. Very minimalist score. So that foghorn is almost the beat of the film.
There is a thing I want to talk about that horn. First off, I love the fact that horn is consistent throughout the film. You will hear this horn. In fact, you can make it a drinking game. Every time you hear the horn, you take a drink, because that thing is on consistently, and it gets to the point where it could be even annoying to the audience. And I love that, because it does build to that emotion.
Yeah, it's driving us mad. It's driving them mad.
That said, could we imagine a kind of a sound battle between that foghorn and the Hans Zimmer Boom, like the Inception Boom and the Lighthouse?
Right. Well, that's what that's from. The Inception Boom is kind of a distorted foghorn sound. I thought you were going to go with the thing at the end of Red State that they play, but
no, it's just this. Could you be like a call and response type?
So there's
thing.
some really cool. Again, if you want to go down a YouTube wormhole, look up foghorn videos of No, I'm serious. Like, it's really cool.
I know you're serious.
Like,
I'm just knowing that
it's kind of like ASMR for, I don't know, like really taken to the utmost. But yeah, and I love the way the horn in this one sounds. It's not the biggest foghorn, so you'll know that if you watch some YouTube videos. But he gets inside it at one point. And I want to say, like, this film, the way it uses those sounds, and it immediately sets that atmosphere from the opening. But go ahead, you were talking about the opening, so.
Yeah, but the thing, okay, so yeah, the sound is amazing, but what I absolutely love about the aesthetic of the film and the visual way that the film works, I love how this does the opening. The first three shots are really awesome. The first thing we see is the back of our two main leads' heads as they're coming to the island. You see the lighthouse in the foreground, or in the background. You have the two leads back of their heads in the foreground. Then you see them come up to the lighthouse, and then it smashes to basically them breaking the fourth wall. Right, they're
staring right. Yep, looking at the ship depart.
Well, we don't know that at the beginning, and this is a long take. We're talking about like 30 seconds of them just looking at you, and of course it does cut right next to them to us realizing they're watching the. But that is so disarming, especially the looks on their faces. This kind of like not really bored or angry, just kind of unamused type look.
Well, there's a couple of shots throughout the movie that you look at and you go, oh, that's the poster for the movie. Like this film is so well composed that there are several moments where you're like, oh yeah, I mean, they're looking at the camera, they're looking down the thing. It's the poster for the movie right there.
Yes. One of my favorite shots or sequences is them first going into the house and they're in the room. And it's centered, right? So you see Pattinson on the left, and then you just hear Defoe pissing in a can, but you don't realize that he's in the same room until he gets to the right side of the pillar, and you're
chimney,
like, oh, that's gross. Like, why are they? And then you, I think that right there puts you into the fact that, oh, this is really old because they have chamber pots. Like, this is.
Yeah, this is the 1890s, right?
Yeah.
1890 or like 1900s, within that realm. But those three shots really sets that up, especially that long fourth wall break. Or I guess you could say it's not really. It breaks the fourth wall because they're looking at the camera. You can tell they're looking at the camera, but it's
Yeah,
just,
and then you see the reverse shot of the ship leaving, and you're like, that's why they look so forlorn.
that's true, but it's just the 30 seconds, that very long, like, stare down, like they're staring down the camera to an extent.
We're a good 10 minutes in before there's dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a fair spell before
Just about,
we get to,
Yeah, no, I mean,
we get to
they
that
go
point.
through almost the entire first day without saying a word until he gets to his to the toast.
the dinner. Oh, the toast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love how it sets up the lighthouse and the enclosure, you know, the things around it. I love, especially considering the black and white, that everything looks just dark, and there's no place in that has any, that there's no good having good lighting or good light around. In fact, one thing I only realized just on the last screening is that when there's actually light around, bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
When things get lighter, this is like the opposite of horror. You know, usually it's when things get darker is when, like, the monsters come out. The monsters come out when the light is around.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And that is amazing how they set that up with a day of this of these two guys taking on this job.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you look at, I guess to light the film, they had to really amp up the lighting. So they're using a film stock that is not light sensitive at all. So you really have to amp up the light to get it really where you want. So you kind of have to imagine that in these scenes, they're supposed to be like dimly lit. It's actually super bright. And then you think about the final shot of the film that is overexposed, and kind of like what that had to have been like.
I can only imagine, like, with the constant cover shots of, like, the waves and watching the sea and the storms. That stuff really impressed me visually with the black and white, because I'm just thinking to myself, like, how the hell do they shoot it like this with this black and white?
Right.
Because black and white already requires a lot more light than color. And we're talking about, like, these clouds. I mean, how do you shoot clouds like this? I mean, it was like things that other films you kind of take for granted. This thing really had to think how to get these shots.
One of the things I kind of wanted to talk about was, and this is kind of good as we're kind of building the construction of the film, is film design as a narrative device, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this film uses it more than most, but the fact that it's in black and white gives you this sense of foreboding. It gives you the sense of, like, you're in a period piece without it even telling you that you are. Right. And it also plays on kind of this monotony of the life that they have, right? Their life really has little color. It's, you know, you think about the slate sea, the slate sky, the slate rock, the white lighthouse, and the light, right? You're either dark or you're lit, and that's all that there really is to your life. And I think that's pretty powerful when you think about the way that they're conveying that just through the absence of color. And the other thing is the aspect ratio. So if you want to know, the specs for this are 1.19 to 1. So that aspect ratio was commonly called movie tone, last used mainstream
The artist.
In 1926 to 1932. So this was kind of the industry standard. It's been used for one-off films throughout, but I love that it's kind of like this was a legit thing, and this was legitimately how movies were made at one point. But I love that the aspect ratio, and again, we're watching it on probably widescreen TVs, right? Yeah. So we get the black bars on the side, and that kind of like makes you immediately feel claustrophobic because everything is so much more narrow. And you also get this sense that there are things just outside of your field of view, and it amps up this mysterious feeling that there are things that you're not able to see that may be kind of lurking at the corners.
It's one of the reasons why I'm disappointed in myself for not seeing this in a theater. Having two experiences in a theater. One, the main thing with Midsummer was that big screen, because everything was so bright all the time, really engrosses you the entire way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And with the way that the aspect ratio with this movie would have done the entire time that I'm watching this movie, it would have just honed me in so much into what is going on right in front of me. And then on top of the fact that almost the entire movie is centered, it's a centered shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even like better for me. And I just, you focus in so much, and you would have felt all around you, I think to your point, that those big lines on the side would have focused you in. The centering shots would have focused you in, and then you have this foghorn that is consistently going, and you're just like, what is happening to me? I'm just falling into this whole piece where now the black and white doesn't matter, and the weirdness of it doesn't matter. The language doesn't matter because you're fully immersed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And one thing that I love about the format ratio, specifically that you haven't mentioned, because I love the other stuff that mentioned, everything y'all mentioned. But the thing that I also loved about it is that when Defoe and Pattinson are in the same shot with one another, they're almost to the point of having to touch. I mean, there is such a narrow, a narrow focus that they are almost on top of each other in every scene that they share with one another. And when they're not sharing a scene, what I thought Robert Eggers does really good is he usually has it so that one of them is in the background and foreground, so that they're constantly within eyesight of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely plays up on that dynamic, and especially with the characters. And I want to talk about the characters themselves because.
Can I add one more note on framing?
Yeah.
Which is, most of the film, the actors are shot from just below their eye line, it feels like. And there are a couple scenes in the film. In fact, I would say the really powerful scenes are, one actor is standing and the other actor is on the floor, which is really kind of interesting. The one that comes to mind is the Triton's Curse scene, where Pattinson is on the ground, and Defoe is kind of looming over him. And they flip that towards the end of the film, when, again, Pattinson describes how Defoe smells.
And one thing that I find is that you can see that, and it comes to what I was talking about with the two characters, because there's some major themes that are going on here, and the major ones I feel like we'll be talking the most about will probably be it's ties in with Carl Jung and Carl Jung's psychology, toxic masculinity, which is something like when I was going to see what other people have talked about this movie, no one has really talked about the masculinity as portrayed in this particular movie, and this is something that I feel like is just reeking, no pun intended, in this movie. And power dynamics when we're talking about masculinity, and then Greek mythology, which I feel like that's Greek and mariner mythology, which I think is probably the most obvious. Just, but
So I think one of the things that I love about this movie, and that the Vivitch tries to do a little bit as well, is it's telling a morality play, or it's telling a kind of a tall tale, almost like you're getting things that are exaggerated to the point of mythology, right? And I love that, especially with this film, because it feels so much like it could fit with, I mean, Prometheus is touched upon heavily right up to the closing shot of the film. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that Samuel Taylor Coleridge, that everybody knows, well, not the whole thing, but everybody knows, water, water everywhere. And
or albatross around your neck.
Yeah, right. Not killing a seabird and so forth. And you get kind of these tales of the sea, and from sea monsters to mermaids, everything kind of ties in. So I love that this is it feels mythological on one hand, but it feels so intimate at the other. And like you said, the power dynamics and how Defoe can kind of wield this power over Pattinson's character that it almost makes him God on this little speck of rock.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting. And you see that reversal at the end where Defoe is tied up like a dog. And it's just so interesting. I mean, it goes straight Lord of the Flies, right? At one point. And again, I think the masculinity, the father-son dynamic, or are they lovers, right? Like they could play that angle as well. I
think one of the things that I didn't like about The Witch that kind of turned me off was the ending. And the ending of The Witch is the fact that witches are real. Like the powers are real and everything that was happening, the devil is real and all that stuff.
And he really was in the goat.
And he really was in the goat. And I thought it was almost cheap because I wanted to see kind of a bigger descent into madness for her and not any kind of like validation. Because for me, it was people are terrible. And you kind of having a scapegoat at the end where...
Oh, I see what you did there.
Which, right? But with you kind of having that right at the end, and it kind of throws it under the rug to where, oh yeah, people are terrible, but this shit actually happens. Like witches are actually real. The devil is real. So I thought that was kind of cheap to me, and that threw me out of the movie last second. With this one, with everything that started happening to where, you know, the bird is the ghost of sailors past.
Well, he's one-eyed. It's a one-eyed gull.
It's a one-eyed gull. Yeah.
Lighthouse keeper had one eye.
Yeah, and all the little stuff. I don't know what it was, but it just like made me even more enamored with the whole movie and the whole story, because it felt even though it's I guess the same level of grounded and the same level of reality as The Witch, this felt more real to me. And just every little thing that was starting to happen. So whether it's in a hallucination of tentacles going all over the place, a hallucination of the mermaid, which could be real, could not be real. And that first scene where Pattinson just walks into the water, you know, that is such a gripping scene for me too, because it's
the logs kind of like parting and floating, and you don't even realize yet why there are logs.
Right, and
that's on the second viewing when you pay attention to that little.
Yeah, it kind of if you're able to remember that far back, you know, you hit it with some of the later stories when Pattinson starts revealing more about himself, but. I don't know. It was something where like all the Greek and like Neptune and
Triton, King
Triton, yeah, and all of that was okay for me because I fully believe that sailors curse other people all the time, and like all of this stuff that
superstition is so important.
Right, superstition is such a big thing, and I was fully on board with it.
Well, that's because sailors are most people who take on sailing jobs usually do so because it's easy labor and it's very so it's very.
Well, it's not easy labor, but it's. Are you talking about being uneducated?
I'm sorry, not easy, simplistic.
Yeah. And your life as a sailor, you're at the mercy of nature, right?
Right.
And so that in and of itself, you have to believe in things, greater powers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the dynamic can be seen as multiple things. Lovers, father, son. It could be man versus Greek gods, man versus God as a whole. And you see that at the end of the movie. And I fully liked all the different layers that were in here. The thing that blows my mind completely was that this was shot in slightly over a month. It was 32 or 33 days.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me because the level of intensity when you look at it, and they're doing it basically in real time. Like, we're thinking that Pattinson's only there for a 4-week stint. That's the entire time that they're shooting the movie too. So it's almost in like real time that you see all this madness and insanity happen as well. And it's just, I loved it. It was great.
Okay, I want to specifically focus in on when it comes to the dynamics between Pattinson and Defoe. Something that I picked up on early on, and that really got me to really think about these characters. You do get the sense that Defoe is gaslighting Robert Pattinson throughout the film. I mean, even from the beginning of the film, he's no matter whatever he does, he's always calling him lazy. He's always saying that you're not doing your work. You're awful, terrible. Even when he does something, you didn't do it. Stuff like that. And then he's writing it all down. We don't find out what he's writing down until later. But constantly that constant judgment on him. And then at the same time, what do we see him do on his part? He stands up there in the lighthouse, staring off, and of course we find out
getting naked, jerking off on the lighthouse, cooking terrible food,
but
you do.
But the thing is that he's taken this seniority role, and of course, again, kind of looking at that power dynamic between the younger man who apparently has been doing everything, but he never does anything right, and is constantly being downbeaten, compared to a dog throughout the film, which is why.
So does power corrupt? Like, is that what this film is trying to tell you? That if you take man in its basest form and give one man power over another, that power will corrupt?
I think it goes further than that. I think that this is saying that God corrupts.
Do you think that? So one of the readings of this film you didn't mention, but one of the readings is that Defoe's character is a believer, and he believes in the light and the way of the light, and that way is his way, and so forth. Whereas Pattinson is a questioner. He's a non-believer, so he constantly questions, well, why would we do it this way when the rules say we're supposed to do this, and so forth. And that's kind of another reading of the film, a believer versus a non-believer.
Not really,
or a skeptic.
He's not really skeptic. He's lost. He's searching for purpose. His purpose is the light. He wants to see, because Defoe has turned the light into a fetish, right? And
quite a bit.
And so here you are at one particular point. Pattinson will get on his knees and beg, like pitifully beg to
let me go see the light. Yeah.
So
go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
If you're gonna read it like that, as far as a believer, non-believer, I think it's more of kind of what Eric was saying a little bit, where this is Pattinson's character is a follower of a religion, and Defoe's character is more of like a priest or a higher maybe cultist, where he's kind of perverting the idea of what this is and and you have, even if we look at it as far as, no, this is what the rules say. The rules say I can go see it. Well, that would be like the Bible says that, I can go talk to him. I can be fine. And no, I actually hold the power.
Oh, actually,
I control everything.
In the movie that says exactly that, which is when Pattinson was saying, "Okay, well, the rules and regulations say we shouldn't be drinking on the job," and what does Defoe respond back to that? The only book that matters is the one I write, not the manual. Right. He literally says, "I write the book. I write the rules. Therefore, he's put himself up to God. He's made himself God on this island."
And it's funny because at the end, when he reads it, it never says his name. It just says assistant. And that could have referred to, what I'm assuming is a long line of basically people that Defoe's character has done this to. And I think that kind of is interesting, because if you look at what breaks the cycle in this story. It's them. Well, basically, Pattinson forces him, one, to call him by his name. And that, I think, breaks a little bit of that spell. And then it kind of devolves into Defoe comes to know Pattinson's character. And again, why'd you spill your beans, right? Like that, that has, I think, a more profound effect on Defoe than it does on Pattinson, because Defoe now kind of has to reckon with, he's been the gaslighter all along, right?
Yes.
He's been the one creating the narrative. And then he realizes that this person isn't who he thought he was. And that, well, you know, you tell a story about how you let your old boss die, and that might give you pause to feel a little paranoid. So it's so interesting that, like, if you look at this story is unique because this is what breaks that cycle of power and abuse. And at the end, you know, we see how that turns out, but it's interesting that we're focusing on that story.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up that you know, that he would be taking pause from being not really gaslit, but you know, having someone spill the beans to him. But the thing I find interesting, like, if that's the thing, then why did he stop him from escaping in the dinghy? And the way he says it wasn't that, you know, don't take property, it's don't leave me.
Yeah.
Well,
who does he, if he was there by himself, who does he have power over?
Well, that's the thing. I feel like when I say God corrupts in this movie, because both men will at one particular point have the power of God on them, and each time that they have that power, either if when Defoe has it, he uses it to make himself high and mighty, whereas when Pattinson has it, he becomes destructive, and violent specifically, and so, you know, and then when the lighthouse itself has power, it destroys it destroys who it doesn't like, right? You could almost say the lighthouse accepts Defoe and hates Pattinson, and you know, with that final shot, which I will never get out of my head. Yeah, that thing is burned in there. It'll be with me for the rest of my days.
Are you talking about the Prometheus?
Yeah, the Prometheus shot. But not just that. I mean, that entire, like, 90 seconds from the moment that he finally makes.
How does he get outside and get naked? Right, like that's one thing you kind of have to think about.
Yeah, I just thought it was maybe the birds that were picking off all of his clothes, but at the same time, you know.
No,
his legs are done for at that point. His whole body's basically done for at that point.
The lighthouse cast him out entirely.
The
lighthouse is a character. The lighthouse is it is an entity in itself.
There's a wonderful movie, sci-fi film directed by Danny Boyle called Sunshine, and a film that does not get the kudos that I think it deserves, that wrestles with this very idea of this all-powerful light. In Sunshine, it's the sun that basically, like, becomes, it's just an idea so powerful and so burning that in that film as well, you have characters driven mad by it.
I need to rewatch that because I remember really enjoying it up until
well, but that's what drove the serial killer, was he became, you know, consumed by this love of the sun. Speaking of Midsummer, that's like a Swedish thing too, right? Like So anyway, like I think that's fascinating. This film, you mentioned kind of Jungian archetypes and mythology. I think it boils down to something a little bit more elemental, which is this idea of light versus dark, and we associate the light with good, but in this case the light is evil, right? So
you're saying there's an inverse?
Well, I think there's something that this film is trying to say, which is that the light, when it's that powerful, can be overwhelming and can consume you, right? Or you can be consumed by, or, whatever it is. There's kind of like this idea of a lighthouse represents a beacon of hope, represents a waypoint, a signal, and so forth. And a lighthouse is kind of a hopeful image, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this film is casting it as dark and sinister in a way. And I don't know, it's just interesting the way that this film plays with those ideas.
Do you think
But yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Do you think it's trying to say that too much knowledge is a bad thing, or because that's the whole idea of Prometheus, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, Prometheus gave fire he took the fire from the gods.
Mhm.
Prometheus was a titan. He took fire from the gods and gave it to mortals, and that
Right.
was his crime. So that's why he was punished with, birds that pecked out his ever regenerating liver. So again, I mean, there's this idea that, does the light represent God? Is the light, hellfire? At the end, it opens up to him. Like it's, again, play with these ideas. It's just, you can read it as strictly the character drama. You can ascribe these metaphysical ideas.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different ways you can go. Max Eggers, who's Robert Eggers' brother, was trying to write a movie about Edgar Allan Poe's fragment, The Lighthouse, which
Right.
is written in a series of diary entries of a solitary lighthouse keeper. And he wanted to develop that into a film. And so he kind of took it to Robert, his brother, and they developed it into this. Again, this doesn't have a lot of relation to that, but you look at Edgar Allan Poe, the types of stories that he tells, and it all fits within what's happening here.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciated the foghorn going through everything, because it was like the telltale heart, all the way.
The beat.
Yeah, because it definitely, it's the full pulse, and it's constantly there, and that's one of the things that because I saw the same thing too, where it was that adaptation, and that is such a big piece of the movie to keep it always in the forefront of your mind that this force is going to be there. And I don't even think it ever stops until maybe the end.
Mm-hmm. And the light is, again, going to geek out a little bit here, but that's what we do, right? So it's like the eye of Sauron, right? You have
Right.
this all-seeing eye that sees through you, consumes you, and to go up and stare straight into it, you just go mad.
Well, can I make another kind of interesting idea? And please tell me if you think I'm going too far on this one. But lighthouses are kind of play a dual, have a dual
Roll.
role.
Mhm.
It lets definitely it definitely lets people know that there's land there, and kind of attracts people towards land.
Yeah, it's a navigational aid.
But it's also warning people that there's land there, so that they don't crash into the
don't
rocks.
get too close, yeah.
So,
And the same as the foghorn is intended to, if you can hear the foghorn, that means you're close to land, even if you can't see it.
yes. So the lighthouse in itself in this particular film is attracting lost souls, because we could definitely say that both of these two men are lost. One definitely has lost into his own kind of world, if you want to call it that. He's kind of made his life as his life, whereas one is drifting and and is in the process of coming to grips with a great wrong that he's done
Right.
in a former life. But also the seagulls, which again, if we're to take it from its metaphorical, the metaphor that they play in this movie, are the souls of the dead, of the dead sailors, right? So they're ghosts, right? And I love the fact that when we're seeing seagulls fly in this movie, most of the time we see them fly in place, which you could almost say that maybe the lighthouse could be another metaphor for purgatory, considering that these men were supposed to leave out at a particular time and they're still stuck there because you could say that they haven't finished their business yet.
Yeah. Well, were they? I mean, so, and again, time is played with a lot in this film too, of, the relief boat is supposed to come today, and then it's like, no, it was weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And that's the part of the unreliable narrator versus the gaslighting versus the just general hallucinatory nature of this film. I like the idea of the lighthouse being kind of this boundary between real and surreal. I think it definitely feeds into that, because it's not just the gulls that you see. You see the sea creature, the tentacles, you see the mermaid, and I mean it kind of plays on all things. It's kind of like the cave in Star Wars, though.
Yeah.
You'd bring in what you take with you. So.
And so I guess let's talk about the mermaid and the sea creature, because this is all from the point of perspective of Robert Pattinson, right? He's the only one and his hold on sanity is slipping more and more. And I want to say that the gaslighting is definitely playing into that. The isolation, the fact that the only human contact he has is this guy that is constantly making him question everything that he does. And I think that when he says that the boat was supposed to have been here weeks ago, but then again he goes back to, have we been here a few weeks? Has it only been 2 days? Again, constantly changing reality for the other man, and knowing that he's in his head, knowing how to play him. When he smashes up the dinghy. He goes and he says, "Oh no, you're the one who smashed up the dinghy."
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that, like, the first time I saw it, it's like, well, maybe he did, and maybe we're just
right.
we're seeing it from
Sure.
an unreliable narrator. But I'm noticing, no, there's nothing to indicate that that Robert Pattinson has done something in the movie opposite of what we see later. He has hallucinations. He sees the mermaid. He sees the logs floating ashore.
The man that died.
Yeah.
He sees the tentacles. He sees okay. So he sees either Willem Dafoe's semen, or he sees the slime from the tentacles. Read that scene however you want.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross either way.
Yep.
But the thing is that we don't see him ever being unreliable in the sense of lying to us. It's just more...
Other than when he kills the bird and then says he didn't kill the bird.
Did he say he didn't kill the bird?
He said he... Yeah.
I thought Defoe's character asked him if there was anything wrong, and he was just like, no.
He just stayed quiet.
I don't know.
Say anything.
Yeah. But
I believe that later on he's accused of killing the bird and then denies it. But
that could be it.
I was
it
actually
doesn't
paying
matter.
attention to that part because I swore that he admitted to killing the bird, but no, he never said it. Defoe saw him kill the first, or throw a rock.
Throw
at
the rock, bird. Yeah.
And he mentions don't do that. But when he kills when he kills the seagull, he's asked what's wrong. And he just doesn't say anything. I guess you could say it's a lie of omission, but I don't really count
you don't
that.
find out how because there was one dead bird floating in the cistern. You don't know how that one got in there. So that's, again, I mean, Defoe could have killed a bird and put it there. We just don't know.
Yeah, well,
right.
That is
and
possible.
Pattinson thinks that it was probably the one-eyed gull that's giving them all the gruff.
Yeah.
And he does a little bit more than kill the bird. He basically makes it explode on the fucking cistern.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went after that bird as though he found out it was Team Jacob. Okay?
That's one instance where if there was ever color in this film, that's where you would see it, would be just see the red.
Yeah.
Man,
I'm glad they didn't do it, but
I'm just like, the way that they shot that, like I swore that they killed a bird on that one. that was a really great editing on that scene.
And so it makes you wonder. So it's a one-eyed bird. Like, is that CGI? And they actually did slip in some. Is it a prop? How did they? Or a
I mean,
puppet,
I would
guess.
hope that it's a prop, right?
Yeah, it's a
Right,
prop.
but I mean, when you first see it moving and it turns its head, and you realize it has the scar. Like, did they go out and find a scarred seagull that would turn its head, or what did they
I
do?
think that they probably like the scar. If they didn't have a
Who
bird
knows?
that had a scar, I'm pretty sure that they CG'd
Yeah. Okay.
that onto the bird. I'll be honest here. I love the minimal use of CG in this.
Right.
Like with the mermaid.
I guess the tentacles look practical.
They do.
Which I don't know how they did, but I'm assuming that was something they rigged up. But
Some of that probably has to
Honestly,
do
I
with the
think it-
color too, of it being in black
I
and
think
white.
it's the way that they shot the film, the way
Right.
the aspect ratio, the black and white definitely helped them make it feel to the scene of the film. Like if it were in color, I think we would probably be. I think the black and white definitely helped.
So one more idea from your notes that we haven't touched on yet is drinking. So we talked about unreliable narrators in terms of, one's gaslighting the other, or, we're getting driven mad by the lighthouse. But how about we're just, drunk all the time and we kind of forget what's going on?
I love how alcohol is utilized in this film, and that the alcohol actually plays an important part in the film.
Well,
there's
the toast is fundamental in setting up the opposition between the two characters. Their adversarial relationship comes up from this first toast, and then from there we see alcohol again and again playing a part. Anytime there's feuding between them, it seems that drink is at the root.
Well, it's just that when Robert Pattinson's character refuses the toast, in a way, I don't know about y'all, but I kind of got the sense that that there's a and when you have that as the setup, that it's going to pay off at some particular point. That there's a story behind that, and you're just waiting for that story to occur. But what I also appreciate is how Defoe doesn't just go on about it; he lays it in thick, over and over and over and over, and chastising when he doesn't drink, and then eventually Pattinson breaks down on the last day that they were supposed to be there. That was the time that he says, okay, fine, we'll drink. And what I love about that is even when they're drinking, it's a love-hate relationship, right? At one moment, they could be hitting each other, and then the next moment, they're slow dancing, right? It's like they could be very intimate, and then all of a sudden go into bouts of rage and cursing each other to doom, right?
I mean, that's what alcohol does, man. And I think if we think about it as I think you're right, where he was trying not to drink at all, probably because of something that happened before. But the other side to that is that he's trying to follow the rules. He's trying to follow the book, right?
I think that's an excuse. I
think it is too, yeah.
Right, but it might be an excuse. But what that could also be is if we follow along with the religious part of this, where he's trying to follow along with the Bible, and he's trying to regain or maybe go to Alcoholics Anonymous, like if this was in modern times, right? Do the 12-step program. This is part of the thing. Now he can't sin anymore. He's trying to embrace the book and the rules and all that stuff. And now we have this other side where this is the guy that's closest to the power, and now he's doing completely different things outside of the book. And it is that power corrupts. It is that part in there. And he finally gets him onto his side where, okay, now you can see all the kind of debauchery and the better side that I offer with my straight connection to the power.
So you're saying that he was using alcohol to make him more pliable thinking, to kind of to create control?
It definitely does. And you look at a couple examples of that throughout the film. So he tries to get him to drink the first night, and that doesn't go well. When he finally gets him to drink on the last night, that's when he starts the, oh, well, that was weeks ago. You've been doing the wrong thing. I've been telling you time and time again. You're not listening. And alcohol is allowed to be the agent of, that's how Defoe is able to gaslight him to a certain extent, because the drink kind of befuddles your mind and then you misremember things or whatever. And things start going bad. The storm hits. They lose their supplies. And what does Defoe have stockpiled? Not more
Alcohol.
food, more booze.
I was just about to bring that up.
And because I think that is also a tool of his power. It's kind of early, I want to say early in the film, where he says, he tells the story about being in the doldrums. And that's why you gave the men drink, because it kept them agreeable, whatever. And Pattinson says, kept them stupid.
Right.
And that Defoe laughs. But, that's the truth of it. The truth is that part of how Defoe's character wields his power is he tries to keep the assistant pliable with booze.
And it also allows them to embrace more of their carnal urges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at some of the stuff that happens later on where there is that brief moment of, okay, are they going to kiss or are they not going to kiss? Oh, now they're going to fight. That's fine. But that is the line that is always walked when it comes to that alcohol and the power that it holds, right? So,
and if you run out, mix your own.
Yeah. And that's where it gets even worse. Like, that's where, I think Defoe knows that there's something more to Pattinson's refusal to drink, and he recognizes that he's weak. And if he can just start going in on him, now it's just going to spiral. And we see that throughout the rest of it, where they don't have, like what we were talking about with the bird in the cistern, they don't have water because it's gross and it's black and it's sludge. And that could have been Defoe's doing all along. We don't know. But now they only have one source of sustenance at that point, and you're going to come along with me for this ride, and we're going to go from just regular alcohol to legitimate, like, engine fuel, jet fuel. Yeah.
So, and that's when things really go off the rails, and you see the physical state, their physical surroundings reflecting their mental state as the house is leaking and dripping and flooding and just getting torn apart. And then, you're kind of in the end game of the film where the axe comes into play again and again until it's, used for its fatal end. But
before we do that, I really want to get back into, because we kind of touched back on the toxic masculinity aspect, and I really want to get into this for just a moment, because especially with the this kind of follow leader thing that was going on, the fact that you have that the Defoe character is constantly calling into he hates any kind of intimacy with Pattinson, in the sense of him revealing things outside of just small details. The whole "why did you spill your beans" felt, because that's a moment of pure vulnerability, right? He bared himself out, and there was really no need for him to do that. And I feel like you could say that some of it's the alcohol, but a part of it is that it was killing him at that particular point, and he needed to get it out. And instead of accepting that vulnerability and fostering it like a father, this is why I have a hard time with the father-son thing, even though you can kind of see it, is because at that moment when he could have been a father figure, what does he basically do? He chastises him for showing that, for being vulnerable, for having any for any weakness. He breaks him over and over his weaknesses, and it's not to toughen him up; it's to keep him weak. It's to keep him vulnerable to his dominance. And then when we do see that when Pattinson finally takes control and he beats Defoe into submission, what does he do as soon as he has the power? He could have equalized it. He could have set boundaries. No, he puts a rope around Defoe's neck and walks him out to a grave like a dog.
Mm-hmm.
The moment he has power, the moment that he has become the dominant, he does kind of the exact same thing that Defoe does.
Well, it's interesting because when you're watching the film, you kind of feel like he's justified in doing that because you look at all the ways that Defoe's character mistreated him. One thing we didn't talk about is the Scrimshaw figurine of the mermaid that Pattinson kind of becomes obsessed with and then realizes is, like it was placed there to kind of like lead him astray in a way, kind of planted there in the mattress for him to find. And you get towards the end where he is burying Defoe alive as Defoe is giving a monologue, as dirt is getting thrown in his mouth, which tell me you didn't taste that.
I did.
Right.
As you were watching the movie. But as he's like choking and spitting out that, oh, it's so gross. But I mean, it all leads up to this sort of, like you said, retribution. And again, I think your point of toxic masculinity is interesting because, again, you talk about man in terms of like man, but you can talk about man in terms of like men, right? Mm-hmm. So you put two men on this lighthouse with these power dynamics, with these backstories, with these obsessions, and this is what you get, right? It's so interesting that both Eggers, Max and Robert, are exploring these issues, writing this film as brothers, and having this interplay between these two characters.
And I'm not going to go too much into this, but I want to just kind of bring this up before I forget, which is that, in my opinion, The Lighthouse is if The Witch is kind of a play on on women's roles and especially young what young women are going through in regards to what their perceived responsibilities and duties are in comparison to the people that they want to be. The Lighthouse is doing the kind of in the same realm, the same thing for men. I think Dave Eggers, wait, I said Dave Eggers, and that's somebody different, right? Yes.
Robert Eggers. I believe that what we're going to see him do is he's telling all of these stories, and whether he ends up doing a trilogy or more films, but these are all period pieces, and so he's gone from the colonial period to the 1800s. Maybe he'll move forward in time, maybe not. But I think he's kind of like showing us the building blocks of the American psyche in a very interesting way. And like you said, he talked about women and religion in the first movie. This one is about masculinity and power dynamics. And, could he tackle race? Could he tackle like economic, like some other theme? But he's telling them in these tall tales, which is so interesting. When you think about what Greek mythology was meant to be, it was meant to be this sort of like, okay, well, the gods are gods, but they're also kind of human because they screw up all the time. And, we can learn these lessons. And he's doing the same thing with his films, which is fascinating.
So at this particular point, are there aspects to the film that really stand out to you that we haven't really touched on? Are there elements that you find yourself questioning, are not really certain about, that you might want to go back to this?
Well, Chris mentioned the accent, so I'm kind of curious to hear his take or whatever he was about to say.
I hate his New York accent because that's what I feel like Pattinson has. I also didn't like it in Good Times, but that's just me. I think it would have been a lot better if he just used his regular accent. I think that would have been very cool, where he's an immigrant in America. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't even know where this lighthouse is. Who cares?
It's supposed to be Maine.
Yeah. who cares? It could have been anywhere, and I think that's kind of a disservice. He's kind of, the more that he tries to go into that accent and lean into it, I just don't care. I want to see him kind of throw some more of his own natural voice and his own natural tenacity in there. So we'll see what happens with Tenet and some of the other stuff that he's doing. I'm eager to see how terrible it's going to be in The Batman. So we'll see how that works.
Well, he'll be the latest in a long line of people who smother their British accents to play Bruce Wayne, because we had Christian Bale did kind of a similar thing. I love Defoe's accent in this. I love that Defoe's voice goes a couple octaves lower. I love that you see his bottom teeth more, because you got to admit, with Defoe, you think of his top teeth. You don't think of his bottom teeth as much when you think about Willem Dafoe. And this one, he kind of like talks out of the bottom of his mouth, which is really interesting. I love what Eggers does with dialect. I love what Eggers does with dialect in his movies. I will agree, like, the Vivitch was a little bit tougher to get behind because you also had a very different style of speech, a different manner of speech. Mm-hmm. This one is more contemporary in the way they talk, but it's, again, trying to set you in that place and that time period where Defoe talks like a sailor. Like, he talks like what you think a sea captain might talk like. His yees and things are in there. And Pattinson sounds a little bit more urbane. He sounds a little bit more like you can't nail his accent down because he's lived in Canada and he's moved around and done all this stuff. So, like, I kind of like that about what he does.
Yeah, I was fully on board with Defoe's voice. And one thing that I just thought about, too, is just the height dynamic between both of them, because there is a scene where Defoe goes in on him, and I think that's where he calls him a dog the first time. And it's the scene where Pattinson has swabbed the deck so many times, and he's like, "Well, you're gonna swab it again. I don't know what to tell you. It's gonna happen." But he's so much shorter than him. But I don't think it matters, because you can see it all the way through that Defoe is such a commanding presence, and it's with the costume, it's with the hat, it's with
the beard,
it's with the beard, and then it's with that accent, and everything comes through. I don't think there's anything else outside of just some of the, the blatant imagery as far as Prometheus, which we've talked about before, the curses that are in here being real. I think that was really cool.
So I pasted the curse in the notes just because I love it so much. I would do the whole thing, but I would want to kind of practice and get it right. But word play is so great in this film. So the Hark Triton Hark curse that he gives is amazing. But Pattinson does one later in the film where he alludes not only to take Defoe's character down a peg, but he describes his smell like hot onions fucked a farmyard shithouse. Like, it just like, and we haven't mentioned Defoe's farting other than my intro at the beginning of the show.
I wanted to bring that up with the toxic masculinity, because there's one thing that men
we belch and fart and smoke and drink, right? We get it. Smoking, again, the first impression you get of Defoe is he puts the pipe in his mouth upside down, and he smokes his pipe throughout, and Pattinson smokes cigarette. At one point they switch, and Pattinson is smoking the pipe and Defoe is smoking the cigarettes, and that's like their most intimate moment in the film. And then they kind of diverge from that. But I love that they switched at one point.
I also find it interesting that whenever, after violence or sex, after masturbation or hitting each other, or whenever after
whatever release,
they all have they have smoke.
There was a scene apparently that showed the lighthouse in silhouette with Pattinson's erection, and the the backers of the movie made them, like, they screened it and they made them
Yep.
take that out. So that was a literal shot in the film. I don't think we needed to go that literal. Like, we get it.
Yeah.
No,
But-
I was kind of happy with it not being there because I just didn't need another of that. Like,
Yeah, we get it.
yeah.
But I also find it interesting that after fights or after sex, they also are playing with their overalls, or they're pulling up their pants.
Or they're pulling down their pants. They're pulling each other's pants down. There's some butts in this movie.
There is some butts. Like our Pats' fans, if they're willing to
If they get past the black and white and the farting, they can enjoy this film, I feel like.
it's like they do the Mr. Skin of Robert Pattinson's ass. Skip to such and such time. There you go. Enjoy, ladies.
So Norman Osborn and Bruce Wayne are stuck on an island. This is what happened.
I like it. I think I also just really like the location because it's such a. We talk about the lighthouse, but we don't really talk about the island that they're on because it's such a stark island. Like, if they don't have supplies, there's no way for them to grow anything because it
they
is
even
just
say,
all
like,
rock.
There's no trees. There's no trees. There's nothing.
Yeah.
So when the northerner is coming, or the
nor'easter.
The nor'easter is coming. It's gonna rock this island, and it's great exposition. It's great detail, and it really sets up the next act, which I really like. With again, the way that they set everything up is just brilliant. It gives a lot of information, but not all of it. You have to still things out. And like I said, even after we're talking about this movie, I'm still trying to really figure out what this movie is trying to say. There is so much left to this movie, and I have a feeling I'm going to be coming back to this movie maybe once every year or two and trying to figure it out like I do with Mulholland Drive.
Eggers says that it does way more questions than answers, so just enjoy it. Like, just have fun trying to figure it out because you're not going to be able to.
And I think this movie works whether you're in it for the character interplay, whether you're in it for the period piece, the film nerdity of it, just the way it's made, the mythology part of it, however you want to look at it. It rewards you, and it actually does, it fires on all cylinders. I don't think it lets down an end within all of that.
All right, so is there anything else before we get to Geek Sheet?
I don't think so, yeah.
All right, so we've pretty much gone through...
Oh, wait. What?
Geek Sheet.
What?
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 What? What? What?
That was a fun little scene. I enjoyed that.
What?
What?
Go ahead.
All right. So let's go ahead and let's do Geek Sheet right quick. So we've talked about our Pats' geek creds.
Harry Potter,
Twilight,
Batman, Christopher Nolan.
Can I bring up an interesting little side note? Did you know that both Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe have both played world-renowned painters in films before?
Oh, yeah.
Robert
Pattinson did Dali.
Yeah, Pattinson played Dolly, and I think it was called Tiny Voice, something like that.
Yeah, something like
that. And Defoe played Vincent Van Gogh in... It was right on the top of my head. But yeah, he played Vincent Van Gogh. So, I again, that's some really nerdy cred right there. Yeah. I guess on the cruise side, I do want to bring up that also Harry Potter alumni Chris Columbus was an executive producer on this movie. So I honestly, what it seems like is that he came in after it was, I think it was at Cannes when it released, and he was one that was able to get it into theaters and get people to come see it. So not the biggest contributor to the film, but definitely helped out. I do want to bring up cinematographer Jaron Blaschke, who had done The Lighthouse and The Witch, but he also had I forgot what it was. I'm so sorry.
I feel like we could figure it out. Hit that Google real quick. So I'll mention, while you look that up, I will mention A.L. Lloyd, who has the song that plays over the end of the film, Doodle Let Me Go, which is the maritime ballad or sea shanty that plays over the closing credits.
Which I thought was perfect.
Oh, absolutely. And as MovieDude Eric knows, I'm a big fan of sea shanties and kind of a compiler of some fun playlists of same that I have on YouTube. But interesting facts about A.L. McCall, other than working with a lot of great artists on these songs, including the Wattersons. He was a folklorist himself, wrote a number of pieces, and interestingly, provided some translations, including one of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. So
that is cool.
The kind of first English language publication of Gregor Samsa turning into a giant cockroach.
That's fantastic.
Which, again, if you think about that and you think about this movie, it lines up just perfectly. So I call that a pretty geeky deep cut.
I will say, too, if you want to hear Pattinson do another terrible accent, watch The King on Netflix. He's a French nobleman and a French knight, and it is the fucking worst. It's a good overall movie. Timothy Chalamet is fine in it. Like it's solid all the way through, and then you have Pattinson being this terrible, terrible person, and it's bad. Just don't.
You know, it's interesting because if you look at Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert Pattinson, you know, teen heartthrobs, leading men who have now kind of transitioned, or I feel like are transitioning into like character actors. Neither one can do any accents. Like it just...
And I'm sorry, Jared Blackscade. No, I completely. I was thinking about someone else entirely. Sorry about that. But I do want to quickly bring up Matt Likely, who was the art director for this movie, and can we all agree that this movie has some really great art direction going on here? But
well, I mean, I think just the scale that they built a full-size working lighthouse to do the film, like that in and of itself is an undertaking. It had to have a cutaway for the scene where you go up through the lighthouse. Apparently, Eggers said you could see it for 16 miles, like the actual light that it cast. So
wow.
And you were saying before the show that they donated it to the Nova Scotian government or something.
Yep, and they turned it a landmark. So yeah, I that was a really detail I found out about it.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up Matt Likely though, who was responsible for some shows that I know that I watch. Specifically, Haven. Have y'all seen Haven?
I think so. Is that the is that the werewolf one? No. Okay.
No.
It's like a coastal town. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel. Yeah. Right. Weird things happen.
Yeah.
I was like vaguely aware of it.
And Breakout Kings, which is kind of the kind of a prison break type, but and of course Hobo with a Shotgun. Who could forget?
Yeah.
Hobo with a Shotgun.
I will say I think Eggers and Ari Aster are kind of in like the same vein for me, where they don't have a lot to show at the moment, but I think I'm gonna watch anything that they make. I hated Hereditary. I thought that was terrible. I'm the only one apparently that hates it.
I agree.
Oh, perfect.
I hate
cool.
That movie
fantastic.
With a passion.
So, but Midsummer, I'm 110% in. Like I was blown away all the way through, and I think the quality that he's doing on that side and the quality that Eggers is doing on his side, and just the way that they're making movies is so interesting, and I'm super excited to see all the new stuff that'll come out to where it's completely different from what you see, and they're still gaining mainstream attention too, which I really appreciate, because the Midsummer was, for lack of a better word, a blockbuster horror movie for the most part. Everybody was talking about it. It's such a big release. Hereditary was the same way. And with The Witch having such critical and actual audience praise for it. That was fantastic. And the Lighthouse still had kind of that same thing, even though it was a much smaller release all the way through.
I'm going to say right now, Ari Aster and
Robert Eggers.
Robert Eggers are they're the new face of horror. I believe that they're changing the game specifically. Even though I hated Hereditary, even after I saw it, I could tell that you have to be talented to make a movie like that. Even if I hate it, I have to respect talent. And so I went to Midsummer excited because I was curious to see how Ari Aster was going to do. And I pretty much guarantee you we're going to talk about Midsummer at some point because I want to talk about that movie. But I also got to say about A24 because A24 is responsible for both these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they have truly understood the kinds of movies that they want to make, and especially when they see one that's totally out there and just needs that encouragement and that excitement, they will put it 100% behind them. Another movie that I didn't get on my that really I'm a little pissed off that it didn't get as much love as it should have was Under the Silver Lake. I don't know if either one of you have seen it with Andrew Garfield.
No.
I've heard of it. It's got Tobey Maguire too. It's got both Spider-Men. Right?
I don't. No. Tobey Maguire wasn't in Under the Silver Lake.
Am I thinking of a different movie?
Probably.
Okay.
But
somebody was telling me about a movie that they did together, and it was kind of weird. But
the thing I love
about A24 is they'll throw you a Ladybird too. They'll throw out some movies. It's not all horror, right? Yeah. And you kind of don't know. I guess now a Blumhouse movie, you kind of know what you're going to get, but the A24 label can kind of be almost anything, but it's not going to be like anything else, which is really fun to kind of think about.
That's true. I mean, hell, just last year, like I said, 4 of the movies, 3 of them made my top 10 list, or top 20 list. And so that says a lot about what A24 is doing, and they are constantly making me excited. Even movies that don't make my list, I still appreciate, like mid-90s. I don't know if any of you have seen that one, but it's really good, and I would strongly recommend it. Under the Silver Lake, again, another one I would suggest, even though that one is a little bit more mixed for other audiences. Apparently, I guess I am the only one who really appreciates that film. But yeah, A24 has got it going. But all right, so let's go ahead. We're running a little late, so let's go.
How long have we been on this podcast?
About an hour.
5 weeks.
Not long enough.
2 days. Where are we? Help me to recollect.
No gaslighting on the podcast, man. No, don't do that, please. All right, Chris, Lobster, do you agree with the critics on The Lighthouse? Do you give it a pass? Do you give it a fail? Or do you give it a maybe? Lobster.
Yeah, so I like that you slipped into kind of your old mode there, because this does feel like the old days. But I'm going to give this one a solid pass. The first time I watched it, I had a little bit of trouble with just getting through the movie. Again, the pacing is not traditional. It definitely takes its time. It's very atmospheric, and a lot of it seems almost rather tedious until you get to some of the bigger scenes. So the second time I watched it, in preparation for this, I really tried to focus in on the thematic stuff, like you were saying, the mechanics of how the film was trying to tell its story. And I feel like the second viewing, I got a lot more out of it. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it the first time. Obviously, you're really kind of taken aback by what you're seeing. But the more I think about the movie, the more I think about the performances by the two actors, and the more I think of how the filmmakers are constructing the world of the film with the film itself, with the film stock that they're using, with the way it's framed, with the way it's lit, with the way it sounds. And then even though it's a black and white movie on a very claustrophobic looking aspect ratio, they're trying to key into all of your other senses, your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your sense of touch. I just feel that dirt in my mouth when he's, getting it chucked in under the lighthouse there. And I really think that is such an accomplishment as a director. And while there are flashes of this in the Vivitch, I feel like this is where Eggers is really honing his craft, really giving himself the freedom to experiment, to see what he can accomplish, and working with two very, very skilled and talented actors. I'm not going to disrespect anyone who was in the Vivitch, but I think that here he is working with two world-class actors. And this is a very written script. I mean, they're not up there ad-libbing. Look at some of the monologues that they're giving. It's very well written, but at the same time, there's this almost surreal, like you buy into it kind of being off the cut and improvised, the way that it just comes out. So again, I'm going to give this a solid pass all the way across. I think if you're someone who's on the fence about checking out a movie like this, do yourself a favor, watch it once, give yourself some time and go back to it, because I think you'll get more out of it. It's not a movie that can really be spoiled. Two guys are on an island and weird shit happens, but you can unpack it and really immerse yourself in what this movie is trying to show you. And again, whether it's you're getting the masculinity, whether you're getting the relationship between the two men, whether you're really trying to figure out the mythology of it and see what the morality of it is trying to present to you, or you're just trying to soak it up as somebody who loves watching well-constructed movies. I think there's kind of something for everyone here. And farts.
That's why there's something for everyone, because there are plenty of farts. It's a strong pass for me too. I think Jono's suggestion of watching it once and then going back is pretty good, because if you're going to pretend to like movies, if you want to see just amazing acting, if you want to see something where you don't believe that Pattinson can act because you still have the Twilight in there, this is a great movie to break that from you, because this is such a big tour de force for both of them, and for them to be able to play off of each other like that, like what Lobster was saying, with the fact that it is well written, but everything seems so natural. Like, this is something that would definitely actually happen. All this different dialogue, all the different gestures, the way that they're emoting their emotions and getting all that out. This is a big thing, and I think did both of them get nominated for anything with this?
No, just Defoe.
Okay. I think that's fair. It was Robertson Pattinson's accent that didn't get him the nod. But yeah, it's a strong pass for me. I really like everything that this was doing. Even if I don't think it would have worked with other actors. I'm not sure who else you could put in there. Defoe definitely has to be in there. I don't know if he could have played off of someone else. I think it just really struck. And then with the fact that you have such beautiful cinematography, the aspect ratio, everything with it, if you really want to see how filmmaking is done and done well at such a high level, this is definitely something that you got to watch.
All right, so I'm going to start this off by saying something I haven't mentioned at all yet about this. I had a moment. This is what I call the aviator moment. And it comes down to this. Whenever you have an actor who you pretty much can either write off as just being subpar, or that they're typecasted in a particular way because that's always what they've kind of seemed as, or that they've kind of that you've known them through pop culture in a particular way, and then there's a movie that changes your entire perspective. The first time it happened for me was The Aviator, when I stopped seeing Leonardo DiCaprio as just a pretty boy and saw him as someone who could really take on the more difficult roles. This is The Aviator for Robert Pattinson. I've seen Robert Pattinson do odd and unusual movies. He was great in Good Time. But for me, this was the movie that made me kind of just say, okay, this guy is the real deal. This guy can do the things differently from other actors and make himself so unique that you want to get him in for what he can bring you. And he does it so well. And I do kind of wish that he'd gotten a little bit of attention at the Academy. And honestly, I still say that Willem Dafoe would have won if it weren't for the fact that he was going up against Joaquin Phoenix and Adam Driver in two of the best performances of the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Green Goblin versus Joker and Kylo Ren. It's not a contest.
Well, I'm sorry, just Marriage Story. I'll be honest here. Adam Driver's performance in Marriage Story was one of my favorite performances of the year. Number 2 to another performance, which I hope I get to speak about at some point. But that said, this is just incredibly well directed, well acted, well scripted. I mentioned that it takes a unique perspective. That doesn't say that the script was haphazard or it was lazy. It was unique. It was different. This is the kind of script that if I were a producer and I looked at the script, I would have been scared shitless to make this movie because I probably couldn't tell what the movie was going to be. I would have had to trust in my director that he was going to bring in something good. And even then I'd be crossing my balls and hoping that it doesn't turn out to be a complete clusterfuck. But again, Robert Eggers just made an incredible fucking movie. This is a movie that, like I said, I'm going to come back to probably every 2 or 3 years and try to figure out what the fuck this movie is. Because I have an idea, but I'm not sure yet. I'm not certain. I feel like there's things that I'm missing in the movie. I feel like there are little details that you have to kind of see in repeat viewings to really kind of grasp and come back to. And considering how bleak this movie is, how dark this movie is, first off, I feel sorry for anyone who tries to watch this on the phone. I'm sorry.
I had a hard time just on my TV. I think that's a big part of it. But on the other hand, I feel like this movie isn't going to age because you're not going to look at it and say, oh, well, that movie was made in 2019, clearly. No.
This thing is gonna age like fine wine, and I cannot wait to introduce this to other film lovers. This is a movie that I feel like I'm gonna ask, hey, have you seen The Lighthouse? No? All right, well, let's plug it in. I want to show you this to you.
Hey, do you like farts?
and I might even have a little bit more fun on my next time around. I might actually wait until when Pattinson's drinking, and then maybe I'll start drinking too, and see if that changes the way I look at this movie. So that could be an interesting way of checking this film out. But absolutely, this is a pass. This is my number. This is my 20th best film of last year, and I have a feeling it's one of those that would probably make a best of list at some particular point. Maybe not just yet, but I have a feeling that after a few more watchings, I might change my opinion, and it might even grow even higher on that list.
I mean, best modern films made in black and white. Right? Like, that's got to be a list somewhere. It's definitely on it. Clerks, Schindler's List. What else?
The Artist?
I said best. Best, Chris. Best.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'd like to bag on The Artist, but it's fine. It's
Oogie was
better
cute,
than Argo.
Okay?
It's better than Argo.
Cute, but that
Oscar-winning film's better than Argo.
I do. You keep it up.
It's a very
man.
long list.
Just keep it up. Keep it up. All right. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Lobster, for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fun movies like this is, I talk about movies every week on Legends podcast, but, this is one that's a little bit maybe outside of the realm of one that we would get to, but
Honestly, I
nonetheless,
couldn't wait to hear Beef's take on this movie.
oh, he'd love it. But we'd have a great time.
I know, but still, I would love to hear what he has to say about it. But where can people find you on the internet, Lobster?
Yeah, so definitely check out Legends podcast on Libsyn, on GonnaGeek.com, anywhere you get your podcasts. We put out a movie a week. It's usually something you've seen or heard of. Right now we're doing stuff that you can find on streaming pretty easily because we know you're in quarantine, and that's a theme I didn't even touch on with this movie because isolation will drive you crazy. Movies help you stay sane. We also talk about entertainment news and trailers each week, and that is a good place to find me. I also recorded 8 episodes for Westworld Weekly, which is another podcast produced by my friend Beef, where we talked about the show Westworld.
And what about you, Chris?
I have my own show called Ambition Radio, where I try to interview people who have found some kind of balance between their life, family, career, and the pursuit of their passions, dreams, or hobbies. You can find me on all the things, the Instagrams, the Facebooks. Shoot me an email, ambitionradiopodcast@gmail.com. Always looking for new guests, so come and talk to me. Let's set something up. Yeah, and that's it.
And over here, you'll find us on all of your favorite podcast ways of listening to your podcasts, whether it be iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. You can find us on YouTube. If you want to talk to us, you can find us on Twitter at ArthouseLegends, on our Facebook page, or if you just want to send us a nice little email, you can do so at arthouselegends@gmail.com. And I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, just a little bit of an indicator of things to look forward to. Starting on Wednesdays, from the time you listen to this podcast, at 8 o'clock Eastern, go to Twitch to my channel, MovieDude Eric, and you will find that there is a show called Quantum Tavern. It is coming back, and I cannot wait for you to see what we have in store for you there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. This is the MovieDude Eric.
I'm Chris Tondevold.
This is Jonolobster. We have to end. It's bad luck to leave a toast unfinished. So I will say, should pale death with troubled dread make the ocean's caves our bed, God, who hears the surges roll, deign to save our suppliant soul. Gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
Salute and feed.